practice our tips on being more trusting and truly making a difference. Miranda and I demonstrate how to experience deeper connection and understanding with others now in episode 4 of season 1, The Power of Purpose. I am Sam Henninger, the Courage Coach for Executives, and your host. Here, you can learn to make tough decisions through emotional intelligence and collaboration, to grow outside of your comfort zone through humble self-awareness, and to love your life by being truly honest with yourself and others. Subscribe and share with your friend. We release new episodes every Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Being trusting and making a difference. So These are the core values we're talking about today.
For sure.
So why don't you help me understand what you mean by making a difference?
Making a difference is whenever you look at someone and you see a need that they have and looking for ways that I can fill that need.
Right. So you had put like make a difference / service.
Yeah.
Help me understand that, because it sounds like you're talking about just service.
With service, I feel like you can like serve people in a way of not really filling the needs that they have, but like you're still doing something for someone. So you're still technically serving them, but it's more of a selfish way of doing it, I guess, because you're doing it like in my mind. This is how, and this is just how I view it, where if you're doing it with the purpose of not making a difference in their life and looking for how to best help them, then you're really doing it for yourself.
You reminded me of, there was a time back in college, it was one of these classic, I think I'm so smart college student kind of things where this guy in my class, the topic was on charities and nonprofits in the area that we could go volunteer for. Mm-hmm. And he had the classic, there's no such thing as altruistic behavior. There's no such thing as selflessness, because you get something in return. Like you get a feeling of reward for doing it. So there's no such thing as selflessness. And I feel like it's such an arrogant argument to make. But for the sake of conversation, help me understand, because that sort of sounds like what you were pointing at.
I mean, whenever you do serve someone, yes, you get something in return, because we're humans. This is the real world. We live life. There is no instance where you do something that there isn't a consequence that you feel. And you may do things to like push off those consequences, but like they'll come back around at some point. Everything in life is a give and a take. And the more good we do, the more good we're going to feel. Like if you're not doing good things, you may feel like happy in quotation marks for a time, because you feel like you're getting away with it and you're getting quote unquote what you want without having to pay the price for it. But like that price is going to come back and bite you. And usually it'll bite you tenfold. If you're putting those off. I kind of understand like what he's saying. It's like, oh, well, if you're serving someone, like you're not always just doing it just strictly for them. And yeah, that's true. But like you can do things for people for the primary focus being to help them. And because you're doing good and you're serving your fellow man, you're going to feel good and you'll get good coming back to you.
I like that you brought up the aspect of living this core value over time, because when we talk about, the selflessness and service, sacrifice came up for me when you were talking, as I've heard others describe it as it's the service you give where you like there's literally nothing good comes back to you. That's what a true sacrifice means. And I don't know that I agree with that. I think when people say that, they're trying to point to this idea of doing the good thing because it's the good thing, even when there's no immediate payoff. Because over the long term, even if the good things that come to you later aren't directly related to the thing you did back then, it's still a product of the person you choose to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So to speak more on that.
Yeah. I mean, as you make choices to look outside yourself and to help those around you in ways that you are uniquely apt to be able to do, because everyone is a unique individual. That is one of the beauties of being a human. We all have individual talents. We all have individual values that layer together to create unique perspectives. We have unique experiences that we've had that have helped shape us into who we are. But most importantly, like the choices that we make with all of that is who we will become. And whenever we consciously make an effort to serve those around us simply for helping others, then we're going to have such a vast difference in our life where studies have shown that the more you look outwardly, the more joy you have in your life, because you're not focused on you. You're not focused on what you're lacking. You're focused on how to help others and how to help others gain more from their life.
Mm.
So I'm reading a novel right now, and like in it, it's silly. But like there's a couple and they're learning to love each other, and the grandmother comments like, make sure you don't do everything for your husband. Like, let him help around the house too. Like, don't spoil him. Like,
okay,
like he can help too. But the thought that came to mind of like, if you have two people and their primary focus is helping their spouse or helping the other person to fill their needs, and both people are focused on doing that, then both people get their needs met.
Mm.
Both people are able to have that, the needs and the wants and all of that, because the other person is focused on doing it for them. And when you have that camaraderie, then not only are you getting the boy up from the service, but you're also getting your needs met. And like, that's what happens when you're really in sync with somebody. And like, it's beautiful because you're not being selfish. You're turning outside of yourself and allowing someone else's needs to take precedent to a certain extent. I mean, if it gets to the point where the other person is like just taking and not giving, then that's not a good situation. But when both people are giving, that is the ideal relationship.
There's a lot there. Let me start here, because there's so much good that I want to comment on. I'm reminded of the opening sequence of Avengers Age of Ultron.
Okay.
I'm not huge into Marvel movies or much of Disney at this point, for that matter. But that opening scene where they are like storming that winter fortress or whatever, and like they're all showing up and working together. So it's like, teamwork. Yeah. Avengers assemble. I think that's the ideal that we're working towards when we talk about, serving each other, thinking about the other person.
And there's ways that you can serve the other person to fill their needs that they can't do for themselves.
Right. Because we're not, I don't want to extend this whole Avengers metaphor, but we're not all Tony Stark. We're not all the Hulk or Black Widow.
But
right?
even in that scenario, they all still have unique skills.
Right.
Like Tony can't do things that Black Widow can.
Right.
And they all have individual talents and everything that they, even though they are like these superhero, like fantastic people, they still have places that they need someone else to step in.
Yeah. And I see this as being directly related to my core value of being trusting. But before we get there, I want to draw a boundary here, because I know in my personal experience, it can feel like in church, in just life, hearing from other business leaders, it can feel like the drumbeat, the advice is always be thinking of other people. Like, stop being selfish, stop thinking of yourself, think of other people and serve them. And people will take that advice and then lose themselves and just forget who they are, lose their identity, and their needs aren't being met because they're serving others without
The reciprocal.
without the reciprocity, without a clear boundary expectation of how the relationship should be building towards. And so you get a bunch of people who are on one side just thinking about themselves, not trusting anyone else. Then on the other side, the other extreme, there are people who are trying to make themselves happy and fulfilled by never, ever thinking about themselves. They're taking it to an extreme, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So how would you draw that boundary?
And you need to be aware of what your needs are. And whether that is just reflecting on it in some regular interval, or even like writing it down. I know some people are more of like mental processors and others are physical processors. So whatever way you process things, like do that and determine like, okay, well, what are my needs? What, like, I need a place to live. I need food to eat. Clothes on my back. Like, go through the hierarchy of basic human needs.
Yeah.
And determine like where it is on that hierarchy that is your bare minimum, I guess. Because some people having a place to live, food on the table, and clothes on their back, like that's all they need. And they are happy and content with that. But then you have other things where you have like building relationships and being able to trust other people and all of these things, and like pay attention to what those needs are and then decide if those needs are being met. And if they aren't, then you need to look at why. Are you not taking enough responsibility? Because there is a certain responsibility that we have to ourselves. And the pure relationship of I take care of you, you take care of me, I feel really is down in essence the spousal relationship. Because you're committed to each other. You have a formal contract, like we have legal binding contracts saying, yes, this is what I'm promising to do. There's a religious aspect of that for a lot of people too, where it's not just a government contract, it's also a religious contract. And so like that's really where you should be able to have that freedom of I take care of you, you take care of me. Outside of that, everyone's going to have different levels of being able to work towards that. Like you have a parent-child. The child isn't, as a young child, isn't able to take care of the parent. And that's not their job. There's ways that they can take care of them or serve them. They can help with participating in caring for the house or for animals or whatever is in your family situation. But there's a different relationship there. So it's not going to be, I'm taking care of all of your needs and you're taking care of all of my needs. Also, people outside of your family, strangers aren't necessarily going to be like, oh, you did this service for me, so I'm going to do this service for you. Like, that's not how the world works. And if you're doing service for, okay, I did a service, so now you do a service for me, then that's not really the best way to go about it. But there is going to be something that comes back to you for doing good, even if it isn't within those close relationships. I mean, you look at all of these volunteer opportunities, like, that doesn't mean that those individuals are going to do something specifically for you. Like recently in Arkansas, it was a few weeks ago, there was a big tornado down in central Arkansas. And people from all over the state came and they helped and they served. They weren't compensated for it. A lot of them figured out their own lodging, like all of these things. But it was something that someone else had a need that they couldn't do for themselves. And someone else came in and stepped in. And I bet if you were to ask any of those people that came and served, they did not regret it. As long as they were going for the purpose of helping others rather than gaining something themselves.
Again, a lot. Thank you. There's so many ways I want to take this, but I'll keep it at this. You fleshed out the marriage side of things. You fleshed out I would say like
community.
General, community service side of things. How would you say this would apply to the business leader, the executive entrepreneur or manager wanting to set themselves apart?
Well, and you can kind of, going back more to, it's like in between a parent-child and a community relationship, where whenever you're in a leadership position, your subordinates, the people underneath you, aren't going to be able to serve you in the same way. And
well, how do you mean? Because like we're all humans, right?
Right, we're all humans, but as a leader, you have different responsibilities and privileges that your employees or the employees that you are over don't have. I mean, just simply because if everyone has the same rights and responsibilities, then everyone's on the same level and there's no leader.
Well, I mean, what do you say to someone who says like, that's exactly what we want? We want flat organization. Well,
I would say you still have to have a leader. Otherwise, everyone's going in a different direction. You have to have someone saying, okay, well, this is where the buck stops. Because leaders not only make choices for the group, but they also are the ones that bear the brunt of the consequences.
I was going to say that the saying that comes to me is heavy is the head that wears the crown. Like leaders aren't leaders because, we give them all the cool bonuses, and back in medieval times, like they get the best cut of meat or whatever. I don't know. Like they get all the riches. They do that because it's them on the line. Yeah.
They're the one with the greatest risk.
Yeah.
And so,
and to the extent that you exist in a corruptible world, in a corruptible organization, there are going to be people who try to shield themselves from the negative consequences of their poor decisions. And
that's a poor leader.
Right. A good leader is the leader because there's this instinctual respect, admiration towards someone who takes responsibility.
Yeah, and I would say as far as the poor leader, they're only a leader on paper. And any organization, even if you're trying to have that flat organization, naturally someone will appear as a leader and others will be gravitated towards that. People want to look to somebody. That's a natural human tendency. And if you don't have a good leadership scaffolding in place, you either will get a good leader or a bad leader. And it's just kind of a flip of a coin of what you'll get, because either you'll find someone who is power hungry and just wants all the glory for themselves, or you'll find someone that just wants the good for the company or the group, the company, the whatever organization. And usually those leaders can be more subtle especially if you have someone that is power hungry, because they're going to be loud. They're going to be very boisterous and want to take that attention for themselves, because that's what they want. They want the attention of being a leader. And good leaders, they're not leaders for the sake of being a leader or for the attention.
I think this whole idea of servant leadership, quiet leadership, what we're talking about is influence. And I think a lot of the resistance people have towards hierarchical organizations is this reality that a title can give you a lot of privileges, but unless you live up to it, you are living, it's a corrupted title. It's a corrupted position. So it doesn't, moving to a flatter organization doesn't necessarily get us closer to living a life of service, of making a difference for others. So this is, I think, a whole part of the conversation, but getting back to the core of like, what does it mean to be building your career, to be building a business and leading with making a difference, being of service?
Yeah. I mean, whenever and it goes back to like that aspect of looking outside of yourself. Like, make sure that your basic needs are met, and then look outside yourself. Figure out, how can I help other people? And whenever you're asking that question of how can I help, then that changes where your focus goes. And it forces you to look beyond you, or and even beyond your business or your organization. Like, how can I help, or how can we help? Then takes a different route of, okay, well, this is what our business does. So how can we help our customers or our potential customers to reach the goals that they have? And when we have that mentality, then it takes the focus onto our customers and saying, okay, well, this is what our customers want. This is what our customers need. How can we combine the two and make sure that they're getting what they need when also getting what they want? Because also, as humans, we don't always know exactly what it is that we need.
I wanted to press you on that.
Or we're not necessarily willing to admit to what we need.
So I'm reminded of that famous scene from The Notebook, standing outside in the rain. Ryan Gosling asking, "What do you want?" She says, "It's not that simple." Right? So what does that mean? How does that relate? That it's not so simple. It's not that simple.
Yeah, well, because in that instance, she's trying to combine all of the things that like she wants, but also the expectations of others.
Right.
And because obviously she wants to go with Noah, but like she feels all of the expectation of society, but also her family. And so she's like, has this battle of, well, I want to make those around me happy, but I also want to make me happy and follow my heart. And I feel like a lot of people feel that, where they're like, I want to follow my own heart, but I also have all of these expectations and all of these views that other people have of my life. And how do I bridge the gap between the two?
One thing I've seen a lot of, and I am just on a movie kick today, I guess, but I'm again reminded of Eat, Pray, Love. Never read the book. I saw the movie like once, but the whole idea here of Eat, Pray, Love is like, she gets a divorce, things are not going her way, so she just picks up her roots and just goes on a European vacation, basically, and finds love and all that. I guess she goes to India too or something like that. Who knows?
I don't think I've ever actually watched it.
Oh.
So.
Well, I guess I'm up one chick flick than you are, or more at least. The comparison I want to draw there is when we are at some sort of crisis of not knowing what we want and trying to figure out what we want, sometimes that crisis turns into blowing up our entire lives and appearing quite self-serving. I've seen a lot of, especially women, actually, where they spend so much time trying to serve others, thinking about others, that by the time they realize the thing I need is to actually know what I want and follow that, they end up overcorrecting and sometimes appearing selfish and uncaring of others that they had previously had a deep relationship with. So what would you say to someone who may end up overcorrecting?
Well, I mean, overcorrections happen, and then more fine-tuned corrections happen after that. It's whenever you stay in that overcorrection that it's really bad. In the Eat, Pray, Love example, if she just stayed in Europe and vacationed the rest of her life, which is unrealistic, but like if that
too
was
expensive,
right? But like if that's the state that she stayed in, then she would find unhappiness in the opposite way. Serving other people is something that we naturally want to do. Like you look at a small child, and if they see someone doing something and needing help, they are one of the first ones to want to go and help.
It's instinctual. Yeah.
And it's something that we smooth out as we grow older. Try and discourage that. Maybe not consciously. With small children, like whenever they want to help, because they are small children and don't have the experience, they do things poorly. And so like I'm thinking a lot of like helping around the house. Like, and so we're like, oh, well, no, like you're fine. I'll do it. And so we're taking their want and their need to serve, and we're saying, ignore that. And if you hear that enough, then you will, because you're like, well, I want to help, but no one wants me to help. So I guess I won't help. And it affects self-esteem, and like that's a whole like another topic. But like we in our lives, whenever we try and help people, if people consistently say no, then eventually we're going to give up. Eventually we will stop. And if enough people in our lives do that, eventually we'll stop trying to help people altogether. And you'll never really find like true peace or true happiness, because like we are naturally supposed to help each other. Whenever you're having that overcorrection, just be aware of like what is happening, because it's natural for like if you're so far on one side that you're ignoring your needs and you're ignoring the warning signs that life and your body and everything is trying to give you, but you're ignoring them, then naturally that pendulum is going to swing the other way.
It sounds like listening is key to being able to make a difference. And it starts with you.
Yeah.
Being able to listen to your own needs, meet those, understand the ones you can't easily meet yourself.
And that's when you ask for help from others.
But you hit on a really important thing that I've felt myself as a kid and as an adult. I want to help, but I don't know how. Or I want to help and I try, but I get shot down and made to feel bad about my effort. So what would you tell someone who feels like that but wants to live that value of making a difference?
Find someone else to serve.
Okay.
Because if the people that are shooting you down, they either are too prideful to accept the help, and it doesn't matter what form of help comes, they'll always say no. And they won't have their needs met in return. But find someone who will say yes, because there are people out there who will say yes. And not to say like you go find the greediest person that will always say yes and just take everything and take from you, because there is that too. But like find the people who truly need help and will accept it. Because there's people out there that will.
Let's tie this all together, because we hit so many different layers, so many different angles of what making a difference means. Let's start with the outermost and then work our way in. When we are, let's say, in the workplace or out on the town. Community, right? Plenty of people that we either have never met before or are the briefest of acquaintances. What's our responsibility to them in making a difference?
And if you see a need, do it.
Yeah.
Like if your coworker drops all of their papers in front of you, don't just shy around them or walk over their papers. Like, bend down, take the 20 seconds max to help them pick up their paper. Or if you see that someone missed their break because they were on a long call, like, bring them a glass of water, or like do something for them that shows like, hey, like, I see you. Like, that's what people want. They just want to be seen. And like, there's so many stories of like the young mom in the grocery store with the crazy kids, and people just walk by and are like, oh yeah, like, sorry. What difference it could make if someone just said, hey, like, can I push your cart while you hold your crying baby? Or, I mean, because there's that like social faux pas of like, you don't want to hand your baby to a stranger. But there's other ways that you can help them. Like, I hear stories of like the mom trying to get her kids and the groceries in the car at the same time, and someone just comes up and like, hey, can I put your groceries in your car and take your cart back? Like, there's just like these little things that you can do that really don't take much time out of your day. Maybe 5 minutes, that make a huge difference in someone else's life. And you don't always know like what difference that's going to make. My dad has a habit of frequently paying for the person's groceries behind them. And he doesn't know what experiences they have. He doesn't know if they were hoping that the total would tally just under whatever is in their bank account and that would go through. He doesn't know if they have a sick kid at home. He doesn't know if they're a millionaire. Like, it doesn't matter, because he's doing something that he can do to help somebody else. And that good is going to come back to him in some way. Yeah. And so there's so many different things. And like in the workplace, if you see a coworker that is struggling, accomplishing, like reaching a deadline, and you have extra time, like, ask them how you can help. Yeah. Well, let's take it from here. So the outermost layer of just, if you see someone in need, just do something. For me, just this morning, I wouldn't say it was necessarily like an immediate need, but I made a point of working on my social anxiety and just saying good morning to people I saw crossing my path. And that can be huge too. It can be huge. And so for me, what I want to do here is let's go to the next layer, but let's assume that we're going to this next layer having done something to serve that outermost. Like, I said good morning to people that I otherwise wouldn't have. And that way I was reaching out, and maybe someone just needed to be acknowledged as not invisible to everyone around them. So assuming like that feeling, to me, like, it's not high blood pressure, but it's just, I feel a warmth in me knowing that I did something that I otherwise wouldn't have done. I chose to be of service in that way. So let's take that feeling and go down one more layer. How would you use that towards people you do work with regularly? You are your friends, team members. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, with those, you are able to more aptly know what their needs are. And because you have those closer relationships and you work with each other regularly, and you see what their skills are as well as their weaknesses, then you can say, hey, I'm really good at this and you're really good at this. Let's work together. Like if someone is really good at putting together content of a presentation, but you're really good at making it look pretty, you say, hey, you write up the presentation. Don't worry about like making it look pretty. Just like, I'll make it look pretty. You just write the presentation.
Well, let's be specific because that is us.
Yeah.
I feel much more comfortable pulling together content. I do not have an eye for layout or design or color. That's something that Miranda feels a lot more comfortable with. And so let's just be clear in saying being of service to someone doesn't have to always feel like a big strenuous sacrifice. It can lean into your strengths and be empowering, energizing to you. And
that's when service is the most beautiful. It's service should be when you're using your strengths to help somebody else.
Because for me, if I was left up to do the 100% of putting together this flyer that I'm working on, doing the content, that would have been the easiest part for me. And then I would have just struggled. I just would have cried at my desk, basically. Just frustrated, trying to figure out, I have no idea how layout and design and fonts and information hierarchy and just all sorts of things I don't know anything about. Taxonomy. Yeah. Okay, yeah. Taxonomy. Those things you know about. And it wouldn't be any skin off your nose to just hop in and finish up that little project. When we talk about teamwork, it can be easy to just say like, okay, this is your job, this is my job, and I hand it off to you when I'm done with my job and whatever. Yeah. Where's the humanity? Where's the values, the warmth in your heart in that?
Well, I mean, as you have that give and that take of I do what I'm really good at, you do what you're really good at, and we combine it together, then you form a relationship. When you're working so closely with somebody, like you have natural conversations and you have these experiences with one another that like you build that relationship. And so even if like that's the big service that you're doing, even if you're paid for it, because that's your job, like you look for other ways to serve them because they become your friend and you naturally want to help them and they naturally want to help you. Like that's how friends work. Like it's not one-sided. You want to do things together. You maybe go for drinks or for dinner on the weekend or whatever that is. And it builds off of that.
Yeah. It can start with the work you're assigned to do together, but then it expands. It grows outward. It grows inward. It just grows to a genuine relationship. Yeah. Okay. And you build on that. Gotcha. That, I think, to me, takes us back into probably the innermost layers, the core, really, of how do you show up for yourself? How would you sum that up from the discussion we had so far?
Yeah. I mean, showing up for yourself is you make the choice of how am I going to approach today? And like for you, like the example with you this morning of just like saying, okay, well, I'm just going to say hi to everyone that I make eye contact with. Make a point of making eye contact with people rather than like just looking at my phone or my shoes, or if I see someone to turn around real quick, like, I mean, because there's ways that you could like avoid doing that thing that you said that you're going to do. But you decide with yourself, like, how am I going to show up?
I'll add briefly about just my actual morning in saying that I had a bit of a conversation starter already because I accidentally wore my son's sunglasses out and around. I was walking out of the grocery store, said hello to an elderly man, and we were both wearing shades, but I could tell that he was giving me a weird glance. These sunglasses were a bit too small for me. They felt snug, but they covered my eyes. So sometimes when you don't even know it, you're attracting attention that could aid in you being of service to others. Yeah. But to wrap up my understanding of making a difference and being of service, what that means to you and how it shows up in my life is the word I would use is considerate. Miranda's very considerate. She's thinking about what people might need. And I'll share this one little story of, it's very simple to be of service when you understand someone is in need. And a great way to illustrate that is a few months ago, there's a friend we have at church, her family, they get sick every now and again. But when Miranda was in town, we were picking up groceries, getting some dinner. Our kids, they just love rotisserie chicken and broccoli. I think they're going to be bodybuilders someday. But it was no big deal for Miranda to just pick up an extra rotisserie chicken and some other sides, vegetables, whatever, and drop that off at their house because they were feeling sick and probably didn't have the energy or desire to make dinner for themselves. She just did that and came on home and we got ourselves dinner. There are these little things where you need to trust your intuition. And when you do that, there are going to be experiences where it's a big sacrifice for you. That is service. That's making a difference. The more common and maybe just as impactful at times thing is the things that are a no-brainer for you. It's not an issue for you to stop and help somebody out that way. That to me is how she shows up in every day, just being considerate. And I'm looking at her. I know each of us, every one of us, a main tension in our life, a main frustration in our life is when we feel like we aren't honoring our core values, or at least as much as we want to. So before we take our time talking about mine, because boy, we certainly took our time with this. There's a lot to talk about. Miranda, how do you get back on track when you feel like you aren't being to the level of honoring that value as you'd like?
Start with something small. Find something that really uses my strengths to do something for someone else. If I'm backlogged, then just trying to finish things. Like I'm thinking of all my sewing projects that I've started over the past several months that have I had the time to get them 95% completed, and then they're just sitting there. And some of those are for me and our kids, but others are for other people. And so making sure that those are completed before starting other big tasks, but also looking and evaluating okay, well, what do I have time for? Because we all have a finite number of hours in the day. We all have the same number of hours in the day. It's just how we use them. And whenever we look at and say, okay, well, this is what I have time for, this is what I am able to do, then as we serve other people and serve people that have our best interests at heart too, not just serving the community, but also serving individuals, having all of those layers where you have those chances for it being reciprocated back to you, then your needs are being met and you're able to serve other people when other people are serving you and meeting those needs too. And so getting back on track is just starting something small or completing something that has been pending. And then as that happens, then you can continue on and build on that.
That to me relates back to my number one value of courage, because sometimes the simplest thing to do, you might know that I just need to do it. I just need to get up and say hi to someone if that's what it is, or just finish that project if that's what it is. And your body isn't doing it. So it takes a bit of courage to just get up and go.
Yeah.
I recognize, though, that that's my top core value. How would you say being of service or making a difference, how can you use your top core value of family as the impetus, the energy to get going on that?
Well, I mean, a lot of my right now, especially since we have young kids, like a lot of my focus is on our family. And the service that I do is within the walls of our home. It's the service of doing the laundry, of keeping things picked up, and of doing meals. Like, even though I'm imperfect in all of these things, and some of them are more strengths than others, those are roles that I've accepted. And so I strive to do them the best that I can. Some of it is a thankless service where the kids don't say, "Oh, thank you, Mom, for doing my laundry today." Like that doesn't happen. They're too little to understand that, but they know that they have clean clothes. Like, when they open the drawer, there's clean clothes. There's clothes for them to wear, and when it's time to eat, there's food on the table. And in a lot of aspects, you help a lot with the meals too. But you love cooking. Like, that's a strength that you have, and so that's a way that you serve in our family, is you help a lot with the cooking, because that is something that you do enjoy. That is something that brings that satisfaction to you, and is something that you can share with other people. And so whenever, like, our listeners are trying to determine, like, okay, well, how can I serve? How can I serve within my family, with my spouse, with my company? Look for ways that you can use your strengths. And it doesn't have to be the atypical roles that our society has set up. Like, just because you're male and you're the husband doesn't mean that you can't cook dinner. It doesn't mean that you can't clean up a mess. It doesn't mean that you can't do things within the home, and that your job is only in the business or in the corporate or business world or work. And it doesn't mean that the wife's job is only within the home and taking care of the family and managing the home. And so look at and say, okay, well, what are my skills? What am I good at? What am I not good at? What do I not like doing? Like, how can we help spread that so that everyone is feeling fulfilled and everyone's needs are being met? And that may result in you doing something that you don't particularly like. I mean, for me, laundry is that thing.
Show me a person who loves laundry.
Oh, they're out there.
Oh, I'd like to talk to them. I'd like to learn.
But that doesn't mean that I can't do it. And when I do it, like, and it's completed, I feel so good, because I know that I was able to serve my family in a way that they needed, even if they didn't express the want or the need for it.
And I think the danger here, or the thing that we want to guard against, is living a life where it's only doing those things that are outside of our strengths but are still of service to others. Like, that's just a part of life. There are going to be things that you're called to do that you're not the best at. There's probably someone better who would actually enjoy doing this, but it's on your plate, so you do it. But if we are aware of our core values, of our talents and strengths, then we can make sure that enough of our life is spent in that zone, that those things are not overwhelming. Right.
Well, and you can also pull on different values and different strengths to accomplish those tasks that aren't as enjoyable. Like, for me, I can pull on that value of family for accomplishing things that may not be my talent or my skill set, or my interest, whatever you want to put in there. And so, like, I feel a different need with the same thing. Whenever you come to a problem or a situation that, like, it's on your plate, you have to do it, like, or it doesn't get done, then you can look at it in a different way. Like, pick it up, turn it around, turn it over, like, turn it inside out, like, figure out, okay, how can I approach this in a way that it will still give me value and fulfillment?
That definitely relates to me in terms of building a business. There's definitely some strong personalities out there that teach it one way, and I'm not that kind of personality. And so it can be really frustrating to feel like, well, there's one way to do it and I'm not good at that. So I'm just going to wallow in pain and suffering, trying to do this job in a way that doesn't fit me. Mm-hmm. Again, not saying that there's always going to be a way to tailor the problems set before you so that it only ever draws on your strengths. But in my experience as a coach, what I've seen, well, personally, but with my coachees as well, my clients, is we are typically only aware of our 10 core values, top 10, whatever you decide they are, and our top 10 strengths, which we use Clifton Strengths for. People are usually only consciously aware of maybe 2 to 4 of each.
Yeah.
So there's a lot going on. You're leaving a lot on the table when you aren't developing awareness around what your values and what your strengths are. Mm-hmm. And it's all of that you're just leaving right next to you, that you have access to. You just need to
pick it up,
figure it out, try to apply it. And that's what we help with.
Yeah. Well, and in the workplace, like, you're going to be assigned roles and tasks. Like, even if you have your dream position, there's still going to be things that you aren't great at. Unless you, by chance, were blessed to have a position tailor-made to you and your strengths and your likes and your dislikes. Like, if that's you, like, hold on to that job. Don't let it go. But, like, everyone's going to have aspects about a job that they don't like. If you're in a managerial or leadership position, you may have to fire somebody. That's not a great feeling. You may have to do some disciplinary action on somebody because they're not holding to the position that they committed to. And those are not great feelings, but it still needs to be done. Or you may, as a subordinate, you may have something that you don't really like doing, but you have to do anyway, whether it's like a data entry part or Sam doesn't like data entry. Some people love it. Like, I don't mind it. But like, whether it's something that plays to your strengths or not, sometimes you just have to grit your teeth and do it. But if you look for a way to like take that and say, okay, well, if data entry is your thing, like, how can I look at data entry in a way that goes with my strengths, and is something that I will be able to benefit myself and others with.
Yeah. So let's bring this all back to me. Let's swap roles now. Now it's your turn to dig into my value of being trusting. Mm-hmm. I'll start with, this was a bit of a conversation we had prior to this recording, that for me, I realized when I was asking other people, just what does integrity mean to you? What does trust mean to you? Being trustworthy. Like, these terms are very interrelated. And the distinction I want to draw now, after having done our episode on integrity, which go listen to, we had a great time. And I think there's a lot you can benefit from there. Integrity, I determined, and you can hear it in the discussion, as being more about trusting myself. Mm-hmm. It being an inner trust. Being trusting, because before recording, the core value I wrote down is just trust. I'm refining it now to being trusting, because this is the outward expression. Mm-hmm. I think it's important to trust yourself and to trust others. Mm-hmm. And both of those together are, maybe you could say that's part of what integrity is. That's part of what trust is.
And that's what we talked about, was also like integrity is being trustworthy.
Right.
If you have integrity, you are worthy of trust. Mm-hmm. But being trusting is honoring others' integrity.
Yeah. I know a few people who you could say by every measure they are trustworthy, but they are very skeptical of other people. they're not trusting of other people, and they get stuck doing all of their work because they can't trust anyone else to do it. And that's a very natural feeling, especially in entrepreneurship, because it's your baby, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
you put blood, sweat, tear, equity, everything into it.
You find that there are lots of moms who are more trusting of other people with their actual real live baby than entrepreneurs can be with their business. So what would you ask of me in regards to this value I have?
We had a great conversation with integrity last week, or last time. And with being trusting, why make the distinction?
Yeah, I think it could be simple enough to bundle both of those into one big thing. But when I think of being trusting, I think what it boils down to is just past painful experiences. I mean, again, I've shared before that I went through a divorce, and it was probably one of the most excruciating things I've ever experienced to date. Life is long.
Obviously didn't have kids. Well, birth kids.
Okay, so I have not experienced childbirth myself. Right, there's some physical excruciation there, but it was really painful for me to feel like I was trustworthy, but to not be treated as trustworthy. To be willing to take responsibility for things, but others not let me take the responsibility, to have that denied when otherwise I would. Being trusting means there are people who, whether or not they're worthy of my trust, I truly believe like the first step is to give them the opportunity. Because if I'm operating out of, well, you have to prove it to me, then you're setting them up to fail.
Yeah.
I don't care how else you rationalize that idea. You're setting someone else up to fail when they have to prove their trustworthiness to you. I think there are plenty of other ways to like provide those opportunities. You can call them tests, right? You could be cynical and say like, well, you're still testing people's trust. I think it has a lot to do with intent and attitude around it. So for me, I want to approach relationships and opportunities for others to demonstrate trustworthiness to me. I want to approach that with optimism. I had previously approached it with naivety, essentially. I didn't know that someone could hurt me that bad. And whether it's a marriage or a business relationship, we've also been victims of a scam. And that can be really traumatic because you do place your trust in someone and then they betray you. And I don't need to tell any of you who are listening that when your livelihood is on the line, that can be
stressful.
That's when charges related to premeditation start bubbling up in your mind. Like it evokes extreme emotions when you experience betrayal. But to me, coming back to this being a core value of it's a virtuous thing. I want to give people the opportunity to build trust with me and do that in a way that doesn't set them up to fail. Right.
Well, and I think one of the keys is starting out small and instead of expecting someone to fail, expecting someone to succeed. Because when you expect someone to succeed, you present it in a different way. When you expect someone to fail, usually you use negative speech. Where you're like, well, I don't want you to do this.
Right.
Like,
yeah, don't do that.
Tell anybody, like, don't do something. And like the first thing they want to do is that thing that you told them not to do. Like I reading a parenting book because there's never enough parenting knowledge out there. Right. But But in it, it like talks about how you instruct your children and how with kids, whenever you say don't do this, how kids learn speech is they kind of learn it in reverse. And we've seen this a lot with our daughter, where like a lot of, and in some ways, our son, like whenever they're learning language, they start at the end and like go forward. And so, which I find fascinating, but I'm not a linguist, so I don't know all the scientific stuff behind it.
Well, the recency effect. So we're inclined to remember the last thing.
Right. Well, like with their speech, like they learn the last part of the word first. Our son, he would always like pick up on like the second or third syllable, and that would be what he would use to represent the word. Our daughter like says the words backwards sometimes. Like she'll start like saying the end of the word to represent the word, and then she like fills in the rest as she gains more mastery. And so whenever they're hearing a sentence, they focus on the end of it before the beginning. And so whenever you say don't run, they hear run. And don't jump on the couch or don't do this, like they hear do this. And so whenever you're setting someone up for one of these trust tests, if you will, like if you're saying, okay, I expect you to not do this, then like their mind is like, okay, well, like don't think about X. Right. Dang it, now I'm thinking about X.
Right.
And so it's like, is thinking about X still like not thinking about it? Is thinking about not thinking about it still thinking about it? Like, and you get stuck in that. But like, if you approach it of, I'm expecting you to succeed, say, okay, well, instead of don't run, we walk inside. And reminding them of like, these are the things that we do. These are the things that are expected rather than the things that we expect you not to do. And that's a hard transition to make. And it's still one that I'm practicing with. Because it's really easy to say, stop, no. Right. And there are instances where you need to be able to say stop and no. Like running into the street, that needs to be a stop. That needs to be no. But if you're using that all the time, it's not going to mean anything.
I absolutely relate because I am keen to say stop quite often. But relating being trusting to the business environment. In my experience, it can be easy for a manager to think in very black and white terms. They're being very results oriented. And I think no business can afford to not be results oriented.
Right.
What I'm speaking towards is a neglect of process orientation. As a recovering perfectionist, obviously I do have a bit of a bias towards process because it's important to do things the right way,
right,
and figure that out. I really don't relate to managers or entrepreneurs who say, I don't care how you do it. I just care that it gets done. That to me sounds like you're going to get visited by the SEC at some point or the IRS. You know, you can't just say that. There is a right way of doing things, or optimal. Let's just say that. And it's a process to figure that out. Being trusting includes, yes, there is a concrete deadline. There's a concrete outcome that we're looking for. If you get 80% of the way there, I'm not going to say it's not done. I'm going to say, well, what remains?
Yeah.
And like focus on, like you can focus on the results while still being supportive and not being super judgmental all along the way. Like that's, again, I think that relates back to setting people up to fail. Because if someone comes to you for help or just to report that we're sort of at a standstill, this project sort of stalled out, we don't know what to do, the knee-jerk reaction, the self-oriented reaction is, how does this affect me? Like, oh, you're affecting me this way by not getting me the results. Instead, when we are making a difference, being of service, and being trusting, you start with, how can I help? And when there's a real click in my mind when it comes to that, because sometimes I am on that brink. I'm not in the best place emotionally, just handling stress throughout the day, where it comes down to a choice of, do I say, what are you doing? Why did you do this? Like, start judging just everything. And coming from a place of, you are
victim.
Yeah, being a victim. Yeah, like, you are affecting me this way and it's negative, and so I'm going to judge you. You can make a choice as well to say, I am an agent of change. I can offer help. And maybe you offer help and you dive in and you find out there's a lot of known problems. There's a lot of unanticipated problems. And then you grind it out. You figure something out. You keep going through the process of completing that, whatever it is, the decision to be made, the task. Again, it comes from orientation, from intent of, I want to show people not only that I operate through integrity, that I am trustworthy, but I trust myself so much that I'm willing to trust you as well.
Yeah, I love that you commented that, because trust is both ways, especially in the workplace. Like, you have your managers and you have your employees. And if your employees don't trust your managers to be fair, they're never going to bring anything up. Right. And I've experienced this where being in that employee state where what was focused on was output and less focused on was actual quality work. We had one employee where his output was great. He was always exceeding and he was always being celebrated for it. But what was not being focused on was other people were having to clean up his work. And I ended up having to clean up a lot of it. And it was really frustrating because I worked slower. And so I was punished because I wasn't reaching these benchmarks that other people were reaching. But the quality of my work was much better. But that was ignored because I wasn't reaching the output amount. And there needs to be a balance.
Sure.
You can't just let people work as slowly as they want and perfect it as much as you want. That's not a good business model, because you do need to have that output. But you need to find that balance of okay, well, if someone is exceeding everybody else consistently, what are they doing differently? Is their quality of their work the same as everyone else? Are they cutting corners? Are they skipping steps? Or have they found a better way? And if they did, then let's teach other people that way. But if you're just celebrating one aspect of what someone's doing, but they're getting there in a not honest way, then your other employees are not going to trust you as a manager. And they will not be willing to ask for help when they need help.
As an executive, manager, entrepreneur, some of the most important things that you can spend your time thinking about is incentive, is what gets rewarded, what gets punished. This is behavioral psychology. I could dive deep into that kind of stuff. And it's popular to dive into behavioral psychology because it's some of the most concrete stuff that non-psychological people will be like, okay, just do this. The study says do this. Okay, I'll do it to increase performance or whatever. But when we're talking about performance, the thing you just said, the experience you just had, well, the experience you just shared, demonstrates this invisible inefficiency. Corruption is what I call it. And then maybe that's a strong word, but that's what I believe it to be, is if what is getting rewarded also produces, because it's not going to show up on the revenue sheet, right? Maybe what you were doing doesn't even directly affect revenue, but in as much as you got a team, you got a department that is getting paid to do this kind of work, if the work you're tracking also produces all of this other rework to make up for it, is that efficient? Like, is the process, is the reward system really where you want it to be? And that to me, I mean, we're talking business strategy now. Right. We're talking about how to actually run the dang thing. But keeping it back towards being trusting and how that's distinct from integrity. I think for me, the best experiences I've had in terms of choosing to extend trust is people will surprise you. Mm-hmm. Because we're talking about our core values. You're thinking about your own. People want to live their core values. Mm-hmm. Even if, say, you get someone who feels himself to be totally amoral, is cynical, a misanthrope, there are values that they are living, and they have their own rewards for living that. Mm-hmm. So this is a universal thing we're talking about. Insofar as you can identify what your core values are, you can start having conversations with other people about what their core values are. And when you know that, you can think through opportunities, through questions and tasks differently. Mm-hmm. To help people connect the work, no matter what it is. Mm-hmm. If it's picking up trash along the highway, mm-hmm. right? Whatever it is. If you can help them connect that, that's what a leader is. Yep. That's what a manager is someone who can, again, I'm coming back to, I believe it's the Eisenhower quote of leadership is the art of getting what you want done by others because they want to do it. Mm-hmm. When you can get people to work because they want to work, when you can connect it with what they want, that gives you the opportunity to step back mm-hmm. and to trust that it's going to get done. And when there are hiccups, when there are unforeseen changes,
that's when you step in.
You can step in and you reorient, you come up with an action plan, and then you step back out because you can trust that they are using their all mm-hmm. to approach that problem. And it can be so easy to get caught up in this, I don't know, older generation mentality of, oh, people just don't want to work these days. Mm. Or people are just lazy. Like, what can we do to motivate them? Motivation is a temporary thing, and it's very useful. Maximize your output as you are motivated. But the longevity, the long term, is when a manager, when a leader can connect someone's work to what they value most mm-hmm. and how they approach their life. So that, again, to me, relates back to being trusting, as if I can understand that about myself and then of someone else, I can trust that they will show up with energy and enthusiasm. As an entrepreneur, no one will ever, unless they have the same equity in the business as you do, no one will ever show up in the same way that you will. That's not the right way to measure things. I see a lot of people doing that, where they miss out on a bunch of really great talent because they think, well, they're just not motivated enough. They're not mm-hmm. doing enough work to show that they believe in the company, believe in this. No, being trusting means meeting them where they are, mm-hmm. starting small, mm-hmm. and then building on it.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to ask of me?
I feel like a lot of this ties back to what we talked about last time with integrity. And, but like being able to be trusting that's something that like it does take courage, because you have to go back and say, okay, well, like I'm choosing to believe in you. Whenever you don't have that trust in someone else, then you're saying, I'm choosing to not believe in you. I'm choosing to, well, let me change it. I'm choosing to believe that you are going to fail, which I think is even worse than not believing in somebody, because you're putting that negativity towards them. You're saying, I expect you to fail. Like, go up to somebody and say, I expect you to fail. Like, whenever you don't trust someone, that's what you're saying. You're saying, I expect you to fail. And you create situations for them to fail. And you look for ways that they are failing. Even if they are succeeding in a small way, you're saying, but you failed predominantly, and so you failed. So whenever you're looking at these things, you need to say, okay, well, what is it that needs to be done? And what can I let somebody else do? And sometimes that trust means that you need to be okay with something less. If you ask someone to set the table, but you don't give like specific instructions of like, you put the fork here and the knife here, like if you just say set the table and they put everything out, but it's not how you would have done it, like be okay with that. And if you're not okay with that, at another time, say, this is how, like next time, say, this is how I would like the table to be set. Can you set the table? And then let them do it. And trust that they are capable of doing that.
To wrap that all up, one of my favorite quotes comes from George Bernard Shaw, which don't really know much about him. I just love this quote. The greatest mistake in communication is thinking that it's happened. And so it can be easy to get frustrated and immediately withdraw trust when something doesn't get done the way you wanted it the first time. It's understandable, but that's a knee-jerk reaction for a lot of people. The idea here is your action plan, your action step for listening to this, the commitment I want you to make is start small, low stakes, and give lots of room for individuality. Yeah. It's a process. And as you commit to that outermost layer of bringing people in with trust and opportunity, you will start to cultivate those people who you can trust the most with the high stakes stuff. And even if things go sideways, you can trust that you together, you're going to figure it out. Yeah. It's not about at that point whether or not they get it done right. It's about how are we going to do this together and trusting that they can contribute. So there are plenty of layers to this. Yeah. We could go for another hour, but we'll leave it for next episode.
Fair enough.
Before our outro, I wanted to make a request. Follow the show. Share with someone you know would enjoy this conversation. And get in touch with me through LinkedIn or Facebook. I'm always gathering important questions to answer in future episodes, and I'd love to hear from you. We are improving the show every episode, and you, dear listener, have a say. Remember, it starts with you. I am Sam Henniger, the Courage Coach for Executives. Studies have shown that your brain's ability to successfully convert new information into knowledge that sticks with you can be multiplied 10 to 20 times when a session of learning is concluded with reflection. If you're able, please join me for a few minutes of personal integration. I will close my eyes, inhale through my nose, and exhale through my mouth. I'm thinking of the impressions I received during this episode, connecting new ideas to facts and experiences I already have, and then allowing myself to focus back to the present moment. I'm grateful to have spent this time with you. The music will play us out. Thank you for joining in the journey.